Moving moment by moment out of Venezuela, the de facto leader there has now for the first time appeared on camera, demanding the immediate release of Nicolás Maduro and his wife, calling their capture a kidnapping. Right now, meantime, Maduro, in that image you see him, it was posted by President Trump. He is on his way to the United States to face drug trafficking charges in the Southern District of New York. Meanwhile, the vice president of Venezuela, Maduro's vice president, her name is Delcy Rodríguez. She just spoke. We've got the audio in now. I want to play for you what she just said to Trump.
We demand the immediate release of President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, the only president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
Coming out against Trump. And that is extremely significant, not just because she saw what happened hours ago to the guy on top of her, but also because President Trump, about 2 hours before that video came out, said that Delcy Rodríguez was on board with the U.S. plan. He said that she was willing to do whatever is necessary to, in his words, make Venezuela great again, and that she was doing what he wanted. Here he is.
Who's going to take over? I mean, there is nobody to take over. You have a vice president who's been appointed by Maduro. And right now she's the vice president, and she's, I guess, the president. She was sworn in as president just a little while ago. She had a long conversation with Marco, and she said, we'll do whatever you need. I think she was quite gracious, but she really doesn't have a choice.
Okay, we'll do whatever you need, she said to Marco Rubio, and that she really doesn't have a choice. And she just said, this is a kidnapping and send him back, and you know, essentially thumbing her nose at Trump. All right, Kevin Liptak joins us live from West Palm Beach, Florida. So the timeline, Kevin, is that Trump said what I just played, and then within 2 hours, we got the statement from Vice President Delcy Rodríguez of Venezuela, which I just played. So now we're awaiting Trump's response to that. What does this actually mean? You are there in Mar-a-Lago with the president. What's the response from him?
Yeah, and I don't think it will be a favorable response from the president. You know, he did sound fairly confident that Rodríguez would be going along with this plan. You know, after that press conference, he gave a phone call to the New York Post, and actually Rodríguez came up in that conversation. He was asked if U.S. troops would be on the ground in Venezuela running that country, and what he said was, quote, no, if Maduro's vice president, if the vice president does what we want, we won't have to do that. And then he goes on to say, we're prepared. You know, we have a second wave that's much bigger than the first one. And so I do think, you know, now that Rodríguez is coming out and suggesting that she is not, in fact, on board with what the United States is doing down there, the president does seem to be setting up the prospect that the U.S. could go in with a second round of strikes. You know, he alluded to that in his press conference. He said that perhaps he didn't think it would be necessary, but saying pretty explicitly that he was ready to order that if the remnants of the Venezuelan regime didn't necessarily, you know, accede to the U.S. Running the country, which is what he said they would be doing. I think all of this just underscores how little we know about what exactly the U.S. role is going to be in Venezuela going forward. You know, after the president came out and really kind of shocked all of us by saying that we, the United States, in his words, would be running Venezuela, and then offered essentially no details about what that meant. This back and forth now between the president and the vice president of Venezuela only, I think, emphasizes how little we understand of how this will all proceed going forward. And now, of course, you hear the president suggesting that there could be a U.S. military role to ensure that the U.S. is able to run Venezuela. You know, he said in that press conference he wasn't afraid of boots on the ground. When I followed up with him and asked, you know, does he envision a prolonged U.S. military presence in that country, he didn't really answer, and he sort of pivoted to talking about the oil, which we know has been sort of a preoccupation of his in Venezuela. And so, you know, this is all setting up quite a dramatic, I think, day or week ahead as the U.S. works to ascertain who exactly is claiming power in Venezuela and works to assert their own power that the president now suggests that the U.S. has in Caracas, but without necessarily explaining what exactly that looks like and what exactly that could mean for the U.S. military going forward.
Kevin Liptak, thank you very much in Palm Beach by Mar-a-Lago, where you were in that press conference with the president, an hour-long press conference, I should note. Let's go live now back to Caracas, where Mary Mina has been on the ground for us throughout the day. Mary, as you and I have been talking over these past almost 6 hours, you have been saying that that the vice president had been calling in to state media, but state media was, you know, essentially not really programming that she had just called in. There was speculation that she had left the country, even gone to Moscow. But then it turns out she is in Venezuela, and she appears to be at the vice president's quarters, and she had this meeting, and she was flanked by all of the military and other power players, including the Interior Ministry, and she gives that defiant statement. What are you hearing from people? Do people buy it in Venezuela?
Well, we need to remember that Venezuelans are used to live under authoritarian regime, so there's fear in the streets that something could happen in the coming hours, either from the Trump administration that implied a second wave of attacks, or coming from the government itself and its supporters. So the immediate reaction of our regular Venezuelan is to stay at home, to stay locked at home, waiting for the developments that keep changing with every hour in Caracas. Many people have decided to go to supermarkets to stock for food because they don't know how many days or hours this could last. And also, there are the calling from these loyalists to Nicolás Maduro saying they will not surrender. And that was a strong statement coming from the Venezuelan vice president, saying that they have the law behind them, and basically denying all the words that President Donald Trump said about her, talking with them, or making some sort of negotiations with the Trump administration. She says that they are calling for a strong response from the international community and from the people inside of Venezuela.
Now, Mary, obviously there's opposition. There's the fact that Nicolás Maduro actually wasn't the president, he was the de facto president. But it obviously, someone had won that election in the summer of 2024. So there's a lot of breaks within the country on where people stand. But even in that context, Mary, where does Delcy Rodríguez stand? Does she have credibility? Does she have standing? Does she have any of those things coming into this?
Well, she's witnessed as a strong leader after Nicolás Maduro. She's been in several positions, not only as a vice president, but in several ministers. She's been the selected one in case of Nicolás Maduro is out of power, as we are witnessing. Like what Hugo Chavez did in his time when he left for Cuba. He said, if something happened to me, you have to vote for Nicolás Maduro. Right now, we are learning that the multiple decisions taken by the government with the absence of Nicolás Maduro is to lead the country, the Venezuelan Vice President, Delcy Rodríguez. She is witnessed as a smart woman with knowledge in economics, but she's a strong leader. She's in charge, for example, the security forces that are detained more than 2,000 people over the past year in Venezuela after the presidential elections.
Well, and that's a significant point, as you point out, not just running the oil, but also running the security forces and what that might mean in terms of her ability to maintain their loyalty, which is going to be in such question here over these next hours and days. Mary, thank you very much. And we'll be checking in with Mary, of course, constantly here as our coverage continues.